Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, I watched this horror film, like a gothic horror film. It's called The Nun. It's on Netflix, or La Freira. It's kind of stupid that it's got two different names. But what I thought was strange about the film was that it's very cliche because it's a haunted church. And as someone who grew up watching a lot of horror films, because horror films were my grandma's favorite genre, so I kind of got, I don't want to say desensitized, immune, but it takes a lot to really make me think something is spooky. And I'd argue that maybe back in the 70s and 80s, those kinds of films were scary, whereas today it's more about disease or some type of Black Mirror stuff. I'd even argue that Squid Game has a more spooky element, at least in season 1, than The Nun did. Now, what's interesting as well is the evil spirit, the abbess. I guess they're in an abbey, and then the abbess, I believe the Catholic term is for like the head nun or something. But she's in what looks like a black burqa. Her bones make a crackling sound. Has a very ominous voice. And what I think is kind of strange is that this film kind of takes a slap at Islam as well as Catholicism. And I say that because there's just the way in which there's a scene in the hallway. There's all these nuns, and it's like blurred out their face. So it reminds me of how when we make Islamic art of a Muslim woman, we blur the face out and you only see the extremities. Like, you only see the robes and garments and whatnot. And black is a color that I guess a lot of Christians are afraid of. And they see black as like an oppressive color, even though priests wear black, right? And I've shared screenshots in the past where Orthodox Christian nuns wear all black and they look exactly like the ladies do in Iran or in Saudi Arabia. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference if they weren't hanging a cross around their neck. Okay? Now, what is a bit cliche as well is that there's plenty of scenes where a cross goes upside down, there's a pentagram, and then a demon scratches the pentagram into her shoulder. And another thing that's cliche about the film is that the woman has a sort of flirtatious connection with one of the main characters named Frenchie. He's French-Canadian. He has a bit of humor, but there's this, he says basically to her that it's a shame she's going to become a nun. And she's kind of out of her uniform because she's a novitate, so she hasn't said her vows. But she's on her way to. And later on, she does say her vows, and she lays on the floor and says it. I'm not sure if that's actually how nuns say their vows. I just can't imagine a nun laying on the dirty floor on her back and having to say the vows that way. So that might be just an invention. I'll have to look that up. But even the guy Frenchie character, in the end, his character doesn't really have a good ending. And you may be thinking, well, that's unique. If we don't have a happy ending, then it'll be something different. But he gets possessed, and then our main character, she screams and is like afraid that he's all possessed. And I kind of thought to myself, did she suddenly not remember everything she lived through? She went through all these hallucinations and visions in this haunted abbey, and she's scared of just a little possession? You think she would be more tough at this point? She screamed more than the priest did, which I thought is kind of funny. And when she's encountering these monster nuns, she's not screaming as much. But when she's dealing with Frenchie in the end, she is screaming. So I think the writers, did they just forget like what she already saw? Why would you scream at someone being possessed and you're just standing there? But you can notice when the nun is like choking her, she's not like being so afraid and timid. When she's walking down the hallways with her little lantern or out in the graveyard, she seems stoic in a way, which is way more spooky. I'd also give them props for the bells angle, because if you look in some cemeteries, like vintage ones, there's very few left. They have a cage over the plot, because if you come back alive, you can't get out. Very few of those remain anymore in the world. So the bell angle, like if you were buried alive, you'd simply need to pull the string and someone would hear. I thought that was weird because over time the string is gonna erode and it's gonna snap, and then there's just that jingling. And when she goes to try to find the priest Berkey, she calls him Father Berkey, and she can't find him. All these bells. She eventually does. She shoves the shovel in, almost gets him right in the face. He gets tormented by the evil spirit in the ground. So the whole being buried alive angle as well, been done 1,000 times. Even in the Pearl Girl, Duan Wu, it's a character, it's a Chinese series that I really like. She was buried alive, she got rescued. Yeah, it's just overdone. Haunted, evil nuns, and spooky graveyards. It's just not anything really unique. Further, what was even more strange about the film is that supposedly they find this relic that has the blood of Jesus in it. And I thought for a second, wait a minute. How can you have the blood of... They believe Jesus is God, some of them, right? Jesus is God in human form. Who harvested this blood of God? And then she puts it in her mouth and then spits it at the demon nun, and it causes her to and go away, which at least that scene was shot really well. Like, you can tell, like, the way it just collapsed reminded me of The Mummy, with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Wilson, I believe her name is. That was okay. The White Walkers in Game of Thrones, when they go and burst, it's been done before. The sort of whirlwind that comes, and then the drainage, alright. The nun grabs her by the throat. They're in this weird, creepy, murky water. Swamp-esque. I really would rate it 2 stars. Because it wasn't really anything scary or unique. It just seemed to take a dig at religion. And how would the blood, as well, stay preserved over time? Oh, it's a magical blood. It's in a glass container. And it's clean-looking glass. It's not even dusty. So, if you think about the timeline of Jesus' life, it's over 1,000 years ago. You're telling me that this thing is polished and shiny after 1,000 years? There's no bugs on it. There's no spider webs. It doesn't have a crack in it. Do you know how hard it is to take care of something that's glass? And so I just found myself not really being convinced of it. And just that the holy water angle coming in seemed more comical because it's been parodied so much. It makes me think of the priest's behavior. Just really reminded me of The Exorcism, if you've ever seen that film. And then I've listened to interviews on Pints with Aquinas. He's anti-Islam, so I don't listen to him anymore. But I would always be curious when he would interview some people, and he interviewed an exorcist. And if you just listen to exorcist interviews, a lot of them, maybe they dealt with some possessed people. But I would also argue that they dealt with mentally ill people a lot. Because schizophrenics, Jerry Marzinski is an interesting fellow. But he studies schizophrenics a lot, what they see, what the voices say. And I think that schizophrenia, which comes a lot from crystal meth, is something that is to be studied. So, in parodies of The Exorcist, you'll see priests like say that type of holy water. It's been parodied so much now that to put it in a horror film doesn't really have the juice that it used to, right? Because your brain, if at least you've grown up in America with American Hollywood, and you're part of that niche genre of horror films and satire, you're not gonna feel spooked by that. Okay? Now, the camera angles were nice. You know how each scene played out. The costumes were well designed. The main actress did an okay job. She has innocent eyes, so I think she was cast well for the position. She has these round, kind of marble eyes, where you kind of look at her like she's a rag doll, you know. And then the nun has that pointy nose. I don't know if they put a prosthetic on her, but she's Jewish. So the Catholics and the Jews used to not get along. Kind of today they sort of do, I guess. But I thought it was interesting that a Jew played an evil nun. But there's no film that I have noticed, that I have found, that makes Jews into villains and a Christian plays an evil rabbi or something. That would be called anti-Semitic. And I really just started thinking about Christians are the #1 religion that get used in horror films or put as some type of evil character. If America was a Christian nation, I would wonder, why would they let the Jews not get used in horror films the same way as Christians do? And I mean, it's fascinating just how many satires, horror films have some type of Christian angle to it. And it's fascinating to think about how Christians let that happen. And another cliche is that came out in this film is the mean nun, right? So in the beginning scene, the character is talking about the animals that weren't mentioned in the Bible, which is stupid. Like, if you're trying to bring up evolution and then description of animals, a holy book doesn't need to have an encyclopedia of every single creature in existence. So I thought that angle was kind of stupid. But an older nun comes in, seems kind of frustrated with the way in which the young woman is behaving with the children. And so this plays on the meanness of a celibate woman. And there was a lot of comedians in the past who would make fun of nuns because they'd say, oh, they can't get it in. So they're always grumpy and unhappy because they're not able to get, relaxed and stuff in the same way. So they're uptight, prude, and cruel. And Hollywood has done a very interesting slander campaign against nuns by always depicting them as cruel, evil ladies. And no doubt, in history, if you look up indigenous bodies buried on the grounds of Catholic area Canada. But I recall reading a story that just documented how some of the nuns treated the indigenous peoples in Canada. And, nuns could give you a smack on the hand with the ruler. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, today, kids run wild. They don't have dads. Their moms are at work, and TikTok is raising them. So, hey, maybe a little ruler smack on the hand might make some of these kids behave. But, the soft parenting of the liberals, they'll have you learn about drag queens, but a nun isn't allowed to smack your hand because you're throwing things at another student. It's very strange, the priorities we have. But I'm not some parenting expert. But I just feel like the lack of discipline, physical consequences, which are part of the real world, you're just going to get a Joffrey Baratheon who likes to pluck wings off of flies. So, the Hollywood angle of make the nuns grumpy, uptight, and cruel is something that has been put on nuns quite a lot. And that's a stigma that's been attached to them. Another thing I thought was interesting was the main characters go there. They finally figure out how unholy the place is. There's some type of portal there. And some bombs were dropped on the building and it shook up the portal. And I'm thinking to myself, how can physical stone stop a spiritual creature? But why didn't that priest, when he started having those strange experiences, go back to the Vatican and get a whole team of priests? That would have been more plausible. Because isn't it like the higher up in the hierarchy you go, the more spiritual that person is? They'll have more authority and be able to handle that. But you're just some measly priest. They send you to inspect the grounds. You totally discover it's not holy anymore. You're losing. You got put in a coffin by that creature and lured. So you need to realize that you obviously are not doing too well. You don't have what it takes to defeat that creature. So you need to call in the big shots. That's what I was thinking, would have been better. But it just felt very cheesy. Very cheesy. And the fact that the nun was wearing a skirt showing her legs, I was like, they're kind of making the lust angle in. Now, to atheists or feminist lunatics, they'll be like, what's the big deal? But when you think about the purpose of a nun is to cut off all sensuality. She's not allowed to have a husband. Not allowed to have children. She gotta be celibate till the day she dies. So she cuts off all aspects of her sexuality in order to be Jesus' bride, which is quite creepy. And, wouldn't that make Jesus polygamous? If all nuns are Jesus' brides, that means that he's polygamous. Peace be upon Jesus. But some of the terminologies doesn't make sense. A bride of Christ. It's like, how many brides he got? Millions? Thousands? But polygamy is haram. Oh, it's just a metaphor. Still, language matters. Just like it's totally creepy, just call every priest your father. And then you say Father who art in heaven for Jesus. And then you also say that for God. The Trinity just makes no sense to me at all. But it's creepy the way in which they make her kind of naive, docile, and just very putty-like. I guess they want her to be like a mouse, to kind of show Christian softness, but choosing a mouse to go up against a demon seems like an interesting contrast at first, but also just seems kind of stupid. I would prefer to see like a really salty old nun who's got wisdom upon wisdoms to go after such an evil creature, And also I would say the excess crosses everywhere got a bit redundant, and the gloomy graveyard with the fog, it's like, okay. Frenchie had a shotgun and he was pointing it at one of the creatures. So how does that make sense? How can a bullet hurt a spiritual creature that doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, can't feel pain like that? How does that make any sense? At least in The Mummy, Brendan Fraser, they shot the mummy and it didn't do anything. They'd shoot him, it might slow him down, but it didn't kill him. So I feel like the writers also lost their inconsistencies, because how can a spiritual barrier be the same as a physical barrier? How can you create a sort of cement stone portal blockage? And then they also said, like some of the villagers, oh, it's that they pray to keep the evil in, not to let it out. But if churches are spiritual and all those idols are spiritual, then how is that even possible? You notice the shirk as well. They have all these statues and idols that are supposed to be spiritual. They start bleeding from the eyes. And then you see Jesus' whipped, dead body on a cross. Very morbid. And you're like, what is this? It's very strange. Why do you pray in front of a dead, whipped, tortured body? I can't feel spiritual when I'm looking at a dead corpse. You know? And so with the Jesus' whipped dead corpse being in a horror film, you would begin to notice the vibe of angry, demonic nuns, dead corpse hung on the wall in the shape of a crucifix. There's just a lot of stillness, a lot of darkness And so at least they got that part of the theme correct in their film. But it wasn't anything that I thought was noteworthy. It's just strangeness. And they shot in the beginning, you know, the Vatican. And they didn't really explain to us, like, who's the team of exorcists or anything like that. And what's bizarre as well is there was like a demon boy, Devon, I forgot, David, something with a D. But apparently he was possessed once, and then the priest tried to save him, didn't work. Then the priest starts having hallucinations of that boy, and then like the whole snake coming out of the demon's mouth. What is that? What are we doing, Medusa here? And oh look, another possessed child. This has been done in Amityville horror, sorry. The Shining. Can we just move on, please? Because it was funny and interesting the first couple times. But how many horror films are like, oh, it's an evil kid? Because the children are innocent. So when you have that sort of, a child becomes evil with like scary eyes and fangs, maybe for the first time you see it, you're like, oh, that's horrible. But it's been done over and over and over. So this film just had a lot of, let's just repeat what everyone else has done. Except with updated 4K, you know, 3D, you know, side effects or cinematic effects, you know? It just didn't make sense to me. Why even make the film? And sometimes I feel like, I'm not trying to sound egotistical, but I do feel like I could write a better horror film. Because now you want to get inside people's heads and bring out their fears. How many people are going to go to a Romanian abbey and, you know, be in their novitate period where they haven't taken their vows, and then they're just like, gonna go meet a demon nun? You know what I mean? And also further, it was really stupid how when the trio shows up to the abbey, they're like, hello, is anybody here? Blah. No one really answers, no one greets them. Okay, we don't see who's cooking food, how are they eating, where are they getting water from, where's the toilet. You know, her clothes are white, and it's like, hello, you're in this dusty, dirty area. How are your clothes not like scrubby at this point? You know, come on now. And her hair is perfect. Like, we didn't see her brushing her hair, her hygiene stuff. Like, there's a lot of pieces let out. She's looking perfect the whole time with perfect makeup. If you're in a haunted place, you need to look disheveled. At least in The Walking Dead, some of the women, they look greasy and grimy. But this chick looked perfect the whole time. You know, I don't know how you can be fighting a demon nun and then look prim and proper. And then suddenly these nuns come out of nowhere, like marching with confidence. And they have to do perpetual adoration. And you're like, what is going on here? How do they all suddenly show up and they're all pretty ladies? So it's like, okay, there's attractive women as nuns all together. It's like a male fantasy of having like low body count, pretty women locked up in this, you know, place. It's kind of creepy to me. But how are they eating? How do they have this makeup on and look so healthy in a haunted place? A prisoner in solitary confinement looks sickly. After you've been confined to a space, the spiritual weight wears on you and you look bad like your environment. But they have like pretty skin, glowing eyes. How are you having all that when you're literally haunted by demons? And you may say, oh, it's because they're nuns and they're, you know, they're protected by, you know, their religion. And you're like, I think the mind naturally will become broken. Because they even admit in the film, in the movie, that creature takes on different shapes and tries to tempt people. So, I mean, how many of us could, like, go to bed and know that there's just this creature walking the halls of this place where we sleep at night. And we saw the main character had nightmares. So you're not sleeping good because you have nightmares. If you have nightmares a lot, you're going to get insomnia. Your body's going to deteriorate with insomnia. So why do the characters all look healthy and beautiful? You should look freaked out. You should look like, you know, a dog that's got pieces of hair missing. I mean, moms taking care of newborns look more disheveled than these nuns in the haunted abbey. So to me, this makes me think of kind of just lust material for men. That may sound weird to some people, but it's true. She's on her knees, and she's all pretty. The Latina one of them, Osara, Omahara, something like that. And she's like, we have to do these particular prayers in Latin. And then there's this scene where it's like, oh, don't interrupt the nuns when they're praying. Like, how are you all get your laundry done? Like, you have your period, so wear your period pads. I have, like, when I watch a film, I think of logistics. Small details. Okay? And we never saw any dining room. Who's making the food here? And then Frenchie, he comes and brings supplies to the nuns, so they can eat. But when he went into the storage room, I didn't see a bunch of bags of oranges and apples and chunks of, you know, roasted beef, pickles, bread. Who's paying for that as well? Because the Vatican sent someone out there to see if it's holy anymore. We don't see, like, okay, who's receiving the money? Because there's the haunted creature there, the demon that wears all black and sits in the chair and then just disappears. Why did the nuns never write a letter to the Vatican saying, hey, there's a haunted creature here, help us? Why did the Vatican suddenly have to send a man to go check all those nuns' verification? And they only send one guy? So it's funny, Christians would be like, oh, the testimony of a woman is less in Islam. But they sent a guy, one guy, to verify, you know, all these nuns who live there. Something's not making sense to me. Does the Vatican not know there's a portal in there? Hello? Did they not know there's a relic there? They're not managing their own areas? Aren't they supposed to be like, okay, we have this place, we give this... Because the financing comes from the head up, right? They have to give money to those places to sustain themselves. Or they have to get donations from the people who go and worship there. The townspeople feel that place is cursed. So how are they getting the money to pay? If there's no one coming to worship there, how do they get the money to pay for those supplies? And if the nuns are able to communicate with the Vatican in order to get money, why wouldn't they have told them a long time ago about the evilness of that place? That don't make sense to me. And if it was evil and they knew there was a portal there, why would they keep nuns there? It doesn't make sense. And all these crosses everywhere, is that supposed to, like, do anything? And then he takes, like, a cross off a grave and, like, carries it around with them, which is a form of shirk. Amulets. I always thought that was weird. The rosary. Like, Christians will think that a literal device that was used to torture people on, like the Romans would crucify people, other cultures as well, why would that particular shape have some type of spiritual power? So if Jesus would have died on an electric chair, plus how can a god die? Would they have used the electric chair as a spiritual symbol? I don't get it. I want to know where it says in the Bible that there's holy powers in a cross like an amulet. I don't really get that. There's a lot of traditions in Christianity that are not really found in the Bible, but that are added in by the different denominations. You know, like, there's no, like, you're not supposed to worship idols. Only, you don't put any other gods before God, right? In the Bible. But a statue always ends up getting worshipped and revered. When you revere and you feel an attachment to an idol, you're doing an act of worship because it has a special place in your heart. So Catholic Church have all this iconography, all these idols. Got the crosses, the blood of Jesus, and that little thing, that little relic. Doesn't really make sense to me. Just a lot of loose ends that don't really add up. Not a really great horror film. And so, I mean, it's 2025, and I mentioned, why does Hollywood have such lazy writers? I did a live stream, and it just seems that it's harder and harder now to find quality. Like, what happened to everybody's brains? You know, you can make a horror film that's actually scary. And somebody should have died in this thing. In the beginning, you see that nun goes and hangs herself. She says, "Oh, Father, forgive me for what I'm about to do." Why did she have to kill herself? That don't make sense. Because our three main characters were attacked by that creature and didn't have to kill themselves. So why did that nun kill herself? It don't make sense to me. And how they have a key, and the key goes into the tunnel. Why? And then everybody's walking around, and they're like, they don't know what that key goes to. So if you're the head nun in the beginning shot who has that key, why did you not tell anybody in the abbey, the other nuns, this is the key, this is what it does. If I die, you're in charge of it. Like, what? Only one person or two people knew what that key was for? But yet all these nuns know to pray and perpetuate, like they perpetually pray so they can keep the creature locked up. So you're telling me that the nuns know the creature exists, but they didn't know the key exists? What's going on here? Again, and they didn't do any, like, even in like a wizard game, Harry Potter game, there's gonna be some type of shield that comes up, like Professor McGonagall when all the professors are creating that shield over Hogwarts, so that Voldemort's attempts can't get in, right? That's more plausible than their portal and tunnel. And the only angle they had to make anything spooky was just make everything dark. And jump cuts, and possessed kids, and snakes, and graveyards. It's like stuff you see on Halloween. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you gotta resort to, like, blah, and rah. What are we doing here? You know? So, you know, get to 2 stars. 2 stars. Not sure if you've seen it. I did see some Christians getting mad online about a Jew woman playing the evil nun. And there was like, maybe I'll check it out. And then I said, okay, let me watch it. But I wasn't impressed at all, whatsoever. And at the end, when you see an upside down cross on the back of Frenchie's neck, you're like, and then it flashes back to like a snake went in his mouth, and it's like, what was going on here? Are we talking about that Lucifer? Are we, the devil, the snake in the garden? You know, it's just done. So let me know what you think. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Join the blog. Until next time.